Hello everyone, welcome to Story Vault YouTube channel. Hope you enjoy the video. What is the scariest? Trust your gut feeling you felt before and glad you did so? Part 2. Story 1. Not sure if it qualifies, but I used to live and work in the suburbs. One evening I was driving home at dusk. I was 18 to 19 and had the house to myself. Brother was out of town and mom was at her parents'. My job was about 10 miles from my house and maybe 6 turns on decently sized roads. I'm a fairly observant person and it wouldn't be odd for the same car to be behind me for half of those turns, but this time a car followed me all the way to my residential street. I got a gut feeling I was being followed, so I passed my house and turned left. My house was one over from the corner of another residential street that was a quarter-mile loop that also had another small street in it that reconnected to the loop then back to my street. This car followed me as I made a loop. I then turned right to restart the loop and it followed me again. This time I turned down the small street and completed the loop again. It followed me one more time. As I was about to make the loop for the 4th time, they finally drove off. I drove around another 5 minutes just to make sure they didn't circle back as I had nowhere else to park except out front of my house, but I was creeped out the rest of the night. I slept with my door locked and barricaded and with a big kitchen knife. I have no idea if or why they followed me. Don't know if it was a friend pranking me or if my brother put one of his friends up to it, since it's the only time that's ever happened, and it was quite coincidental that I was alone. I worked retail and some of the employees did have records, so I just don't know. Comments. That's scary. If they were pranking you, wouldn't they have eventually told you? When I was 16, my friend and I were in her car, and she said the car in front was following us. I thought she was paranoid, and how does the car in front follow you? But then we did some creative driving, and he did follow us the whole time. We'd indicate to turn, and he'd quickly turn. He ended up behind us and then followed us. In the end, we went and parked by the local police station, and the guy drove off. I did look at him, and he did look scary. I had a similar experience once. Did the same as you, kept driving and making turns and doubling back. I called my parents and told them what was happening. They called the cops, and I hung up and called the cops. The guy was indeed following me and had previously been arrested for sexual assault and assault with a deadly weapon. Scared the shit out of me. When I was in my early 20s in Chicago, one time I was riding my bike and thought I was being followed by a stereotypically creepy white van. To test it, I rode into a hospital parking lot complex in the wrong way down a one-way street. The van followed me and I was riding fast. It was nighttime, so there was no traffic to slow it down. The only way I managed to lose it was to ride to a 24-hour supermarket with a very well-lit, very public lot, and wait till the driver lost interest and left. It was terrifying. Best thing to do when you get a followed vibe is to start driving to the closest police station and call 911 to let them know you're heading their way. Story 2. I noticed pain in my lower back one morning and thought I slept on it wrong or something. Throughout the day it continued and started to feel like when you get kicked in the groin. Thought to myself, it's probably cancer. Did a self-check and didn't think I noticed anything and had my girlfriend do the same, and she wasn't sure. Called a urology office on my gut feeling and got the last appointment before Christmas break. It was cancer, but it was super early. Got an orchiectomy a few days later, then some mild chemo a few months later, and have been just fine ever since. Edit for more information because this blew up. I had noticed some similar pain that lasted a weekend or so, a month or so before the pain that sent me to the doctor. The doctor was very kind considering I walked into his office and said, "I think I have cancer." He and fellow both did a gloved hands-on exam of both testicles. They decided to do an ultrasound on both testicles next at the same exam. Showed me both images, and there was a huge difference between the normal and irregular. The next step was surgery to remove the bad testicle, which is called an orchiectomy. Scheduled it for 3 days later with the same doctor in an outpatient surgery center attached to their building. Surgery went well, and then I was kind of in limbo for a few months. The urologist recommended radiation therapy, talked to a radiation oncologist who recommended chemotherapy, talked to a chemotherapy oncologist who recommended observation with the urologist. Had a follow-up with all three, and finally decided to do 2 rounds of carboplatin at a high-ish dose, but over a short period. Shaved my head into a mohawk, expecting to lose my hair, but did not, and just ended up looking like a goober. Had some medical debt, and stupidly paid that over student loans, which messed up my credit for a second. Though the experience made me realize how caring and kind and amazing my girlfriend at the time was, and we have been together ever since. Married for 7 years, now 10 out of 10 would do again. Comment. My brother was finishing up a doctor appointment and off-handedly mentioned an unexplained pain in his abdomen. Thank God he did, and thank God he had a doctor who took it seriously from the get-go, because it turned out he had an aggressive testicular cancer. Got taken care of quickly, and he's been in remission for 5+ years now. Story 3. My dead best friend visited me in my dream and ran into her in a grocery store. I remember I was ecstatic to see her and blabbed, and she just simply responded, "You're sick," and I woke up. In a few days I found out I had high-risk cervical lesions and needed surgery. Story 4. This is not mine, but is chilling. About 15 years back, I worked with a guy who told me that in his younger days, age C12 IRC, he attended a local youth club. One night, the guy that ran it wanted the boys to go shirts versus skins for a game of football or whatever. My workmate was to be in the skins team. He refused to take his shirt off. One thing led to another. A big drama ensued. He got kicked out club and sent home. His mom and dad weren't happy, starting giving him a row, asking why he'd made such a fuss. He said he wasn't comfortable taking his top off in front of the youth leader as there was just something about the guy. A few years later, the youth leader, Thomas Hamilton, brutally murdered 16 children and their teacher in Dunblane Primary School. Comments. I remember all the parents outside our school that day coming to get us as the news said a school shooting in central Scotland, not the exact school. At the time I lived about 30 miles from Dunblane, so far enough away that I didn't know anyone involved personally, but close enough that I'd been in the town a few times. As the story unfolded and the full horror of what happened was being revealed, I just remember thinking, no, it can't be. Stuff like this doesn't happen in a place like Dunblane. Sounds ridiculous now when it's written down, but seeing places, pubs, shop, etc. in the town that I'd actually been in on news reports was surreal. I can't begin to imagine what the actual townsfolk of Dunblane went through. Story 5. When I was pregnant, I got bit by a Lyme tick at 28 weeks. Noticed the bullseye and got on antibiotics. My obstetrics gynecology brushed it off after that. No harm done according to her. When I went to the hospital at 35 weeks to register for delivery, normal procedure here. I mentioned the Lyme, but that I took ABX. Next day, they call me and tell me they want to induce at 37 weeks because Lyme can damage the placenta and they would rather not risk it. Oof. I talked to my obstetrics gynecology about it, and she basically laughed it off, telling me not to induce. My gut instinct told me to induce, so I went with the hospital's advice and had my son at 37 weeks. He was tiny, and it was a tough few weeks after that getting him to eat and stuff because he was so tiny and tired. The hospital sent the placenta to pathology. It was severely damaged and wouldn't have held up much longer. If I had listened to my obstetrics gynecology, I would have probably lost my son. Needless to say, I switched obstetrics gynecology after that. Comments. Oh, this is weird. So in the US, is your obstetrics gynecology not part of the hospital team? Who would they be? Can make the decisions? I'm a doc in the UK. If this happened, I would bring you in. We do a scan and some Dopplers. We'd pick up if baby was doing poorly and offer you early induction. Alternatively, if baby looked like they were doing okay, we'd still be bringing you in for regular checks. Hospital policy is my policy. In situations like this, it's always a good idea to log a complaint. Even if nothing comes of it, that complaint will be on their license forever. Story 6. I worked at a bar and had a very friendly gentleman offer to buy me dinner after we had some banter about favorite beer. I was flattered and he was handsome, but something in me didn't feel that it sat right. Turns out he was a serial killer and killed a backpacker. Grace Mill Lane? Give it a Google, but proceed with caution. Mere weeks later, police interviewed me to try and find out more of what he had said. He had offered to take a few girls out before he killed Grace. Grace and I were the same age, height, build. I still have nightmares and survivor's guilt. He also forced himself to some ladies too. Trust your ducking gut. Story 7. Someone I came in contact with at work semi-frequently, once every 1 to 2 months, gave me the creeps, but for no apparent reason. He never said anything inappropriate or touched me, and I could never figure out why. A couple years later, it came to light he was drugging young patients and videotaping forced himself to them in his clinic. He was family medicine doctor. His wife found the footage and turned him in. I have so many situations like this, but this one definitely stands out. I live by the mantra, if it feels weird, it is weird. Our gut instincts are usually spot on. Comments. There's an interesting book on this topic, The Gift of Fear, where the author discusses a lot of the subtle stuff your subconscious brain is processing that your conscious brain misses, resulting in exactly what you describe. Did you ever hear the story about the couple hiking in LA? They were in a secluded park, both got a strong case of the heebie-jeebies at the same time, turned around and hiked out. Years later, the woman was listening to a courtroom confession by one of the famous serial killers. He had dragged a victim into the bushes at that same park as a couple approached. He thought if they got any closer and saw him, he'd have to kill both of them, but they both suddenly turned around and walked away. Nope. So, that's the end of the video. Hit the like button and subscribe. Have a good day and see you in the next video.